This is Leslie from Anti-Scrente Faction and Tribe 8. You are watching Crash and Bleed with Jay. CIA, what you telling me today? USA, how you set me free today? Beautiful, there's no mouse cake, full of problems, trying to save a little piece for themselves,
So, was Tribe 8 actively seeking lesbian members to become a lesbian band, or did it just happen to work out that way?
I think both kind of happened. There was definitely some, there's always like, this is the kind of person we want in our band, but it can, like I said, it can be hard to find somebody who has the certain qualities and wants to do it and shows up and has some staying power. So, yeah. I mean, I think that Tribe 8 was very fortunate in that there was enough people who were committed over a long period of time.
Why do you think each band member was so perfect for this band? Like, let's just get a few notes on each band member here. Like, okay. Why was Lynn the best person for the job? I like to have punks on Hate Street. I like some hate punks how we meet. Open tells horror stories about puberty.
I mean, it's the best job for Lynn, Lenny, right? It's just the best job for Lenny to be an entertainer and to have the floor, be able to tell his stories. And Lenny's very much like Jon Stewart. If you know who that is, he's a comedian who has a fake news type of situation channel. And, but that kind of sense of humor, even some of the mannerisms. So there's sort of a bit of a wide appeal. And Lenny's a great writer. A lot of the things that he wrote about, like, aged fairly well, not always, but just a really great writer, and also explores the absurdity of the tragedy of life a lot, which I find is really appealing to folks. There's so many people who are great singers who just they freeze up. They can't be a good front person. They're just so uncomfortable with it. And sometimes the right time and place and the band, everything comes together where it's like all they have to do is just sing and be in the spotlight, and their voice is their full performance. But punk isn't really like that. You need somebody up there who can do banter between songs and, broken strings, and like when shit's falling apart, or if there's somebody in the audience who needs to be addressed. Like, that's a quality that, like, you need in a punk band, is to be like a part-time comedian, as well as like have some sort of skills, crowd control skills of, like, reminding people, like, you're here to have a good time. You're not here to, like, beat each other up. And if you are, maybe you should leave. And if you don't leave, we'll have our 5'2", guitar player will jump off stage in her, secondhand, lingerie, and take you out by the scruff of your neck and throw you on your ass. And Lenny loves to be the center of attention, but also kind of there's a thing where there, and I know other really great performers and singers where they can front a whole band or even a whole movement, and they can carry, like, they can write the songs and they can really carry a show on their back. And then they get off stage and they're just like, Oh my God. Like, it just took everything, and they're, they want to be insular, and it's all too much. And they're worried that like they'll start crying if they feel like people hated them, but like they can show up and be formidable for the performance. Lenny can do that. And and Lenny came into it like later in life too. Because he couldn't do that until he got clean. And so it feels like a natural place for him. And he never stopped being in bands. Like he still has homobiles, and, he's been advocating for like a tribe reunion for a while. And, he's very community minded as well. And I think all of these things have been, I mean, he's perfect for that role for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A little bit of a Bart Simpson character. I was thinking, like, when I was watching the documentary on Saturday night, just like in preparation for this, that's what kept coming to me, like a little bit of a Bart Simpson character there. But let's talk a little bit about Flipper. I mean, stealing guitars, jumping on the backs of motorbikes. I mean, has Flipper settled down these days?
No.
So we're still punk rocking. We're still making films.
Still making films. I don't know if he's working on anything specific right now. I know that there's a lot of turmoil in the industry. There's every time there's strikes, it's really impacting the whole industry. I talked to him fairly recently, and he's like, everything's kind of shut down right now. He did a lot of directing of TV shows recently, especially during COVID. He's been quite the hero out there, like breaking into an industry that's definitely gate kept from, average folks. So everybody's really, really proud of him. And, I think it's also a bit of it can be a burden, I think, to be the first, or to be the trailblazers, or, because you open yourself up to like criticism from all sides. And he's very graceful at deflecting a lot of that. Like he has a certain, coming from a really working class background, he has this academic intelligence as well as emotional intelligence that feels like a really impressive combination. And, from the get-go, and we've had some really great conversations. He's called me out on some things, which I'll always be really grateful for, especially when it comes to class, or like he was the first person who not necessarily called me out, but said, let's sit down and talk about my transition, because I can tell you're having feelings about it. And, I feel like we had this really great conversation where it was just like, we both came to this, like, big changes can be really hard, like humans just don't like change. We want things to, we want to know, we want to be able to predict things. We don't like things to be different than what we expect. And he was like the Davy Jones of the band. I don't even know who that was, but like they would always say that, like he was the cute one. Everybody thought he was so cute, like boys, girls, everyone in between, had a crush on Silas. And he was also extremely charming. And we always needed a place to stay after the show. And Lenny could do this, but, Silas could always find somebody who had like an extra room or somewhere for us to crash. And he was really good at that. we actually wrote a lot of our songs all together, like the lyrics and the music. I mean, clearly Lenny wrote the majority of lyrics, and like the musicians wrote their part of the music. But it was really great to have, you know, Silas's experiences and ideas, you know, as input into our work. Yeah, I mean, I only want good things for all my friends. So
Yeah.
know.
So at what point did Slade come into the picture?
Slade, well, uh, Maria was never supposed to be like permanent. That tour that Max went on with us, it was a particularly, like, it was a long tour. It was over 2 months. And my mother also passed away while we were on tour. And this is before cell phones. So I didn't find out until we played my mom's hometown, and a couple of her siblings came to the show. And we had opportunity to tour in Europe again. And it was just like, yeah, Maria's not going to come on that tour with us. But we finished out like the end of that American tour, and I think that's the longest tour we ever did. And for me, it was just like, yeah, this is what's important in my life, is like making art and music. And I go on a lot of side quests to try and like get to the point, and then I forget the question. But so Slade was in some other bands, and I think, okay, so Slade was in a band called Industrial Rainforest, I think, which was a really great band. And we had seen Slade playing shows around. And when we finally were like, hey, let's just ask Slade, maybe that, because we just felt like we weren't like a real band. It was just like such a punk, I don't know, idea. And so by the time we asked Slade, she was just like, what took you guys so long to ask? I've been here. And so, yeah, Slade just came in, and it felt like, a natural progression. And once again, we joked about the Spinal Tap, the drummers like changing. And then we went to and did Europe with Slade.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Slade's a great drummer. It was a definitely a different style than Max. Max came from like DC go-go style, and then Slade was more like sort of a heavier, I don't know, kind of rock sound.
It seems we have another anniversary, because this album, Fist City, is now 30 years old.
Oh, God.
And just like you were saying there about the drums, I mean, the drums are just ripping on this one. That is what I think about when I think about this album. But what are you most proud of from this first Tribe 8 album?
That we did it, and we were on like not a major label, but like an established label that had some, I don't know, I think all the labels though, that punk labels are always rad, even if it's just like your roommate. But it was cool to be on Alternative Tentacles, which definitely, like, when you're trying to book a tour or have get anybody to write about you or get any kind of promotion, it's good to be like, oh yeah, this is our debut on Alternative Tentacles. So it felt real. or something. It felt like there was some sort of validation about that, to have like Jello coming to our shows and being like, yeah, you have to do something.
Now, are you getting notes from the label about making the album?
Jello came to our shows and basically was like, yeah, record for me, and we were like, okay. That's how I remember it. It could have been different, but we didn't really, it's not like we were sending out loads of demos. But I remember we were playing at a record store and I was like, oh, someone was like, oh, Jello's here. But yeah, and he came to a few shows and signed us. And so I guess it just felt like some sort of recognition from like the punk vanguard. We basically had full control, artistic control. Jello put his stamp on it in the mixing. And I think that was a point of contention was the mixing, because we felt like he just he buried the bass. Like we had a lot more bass driven sound, and he gave us he put the guitars up more, which is the guitar player. I was like, cool, but for sure, it was something that we kept working with him, but we kept being like, okay, we need the bass turned up every time that we release something with them. And every time it was like, still can't, the bass is buried. So just the sound, and that, we're like, maybe Jello has blown out his ears and he can't hear the treble or something, but.
What was the Colorado LP? That was from '93? Was that on Alternative Tentacles?
What was that? That was on Outpunk.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah,
I do
and
have
that was.
that. I do have it, and I've completely forgotten to get that out for the background.
So I have it somewhere.
But just to briefly touch on that, there's a ska influence on every Tribe Out album. There's a little bit of ska. Like, where does that come from for you guys?
I don't know. People make fun of ska so much, but I love ska. I think ska is rad, because ska was the first time I saw like a lot of things, the Selector and the Specials. Like, I feel like those bands that was the first time I saw like, a band that it was mixed genre, and it was like mixed race. And the Specials particularly are just so brilliant. But I don't know. I love ska. I am not good at playing it. So I think it's just like every now and then, a little bit, because it's important.
Yeah. Can we get a standout track from this album? I think Manipulate is probably the fan favorite on this one, but any particular favorite for you of this first one?
Oh, can you hold that up again? I don't even remember what's on there. Well, I would say Frat Pig was cool. Seraphim. Okay. Seraphim at the time, I probably completely forgot it by now, but I remember Seraphim felt really epic to play. And Butch in the Streets was funny, but Frat Pig was like, it was a whole art installation performance. So And that got some really after the show response. That was the most intense.
Yeah, we'll get into that. But one thing I just spotted on the back of the album is Tantrum's actually on this one, which I'd forgotten about.
Yeah.
How did you actually get Tantrum in the band? Because Tantrum was not into punk. In fact, in the documentary, Tantrum even says she found the music boring.
Yeah. Okay, so, well, Mahia, the original bass player, left after the second tour of Europe. And that was very, very sad for me. Mahia was like the first friend that I had that was similar to me racially. And so that was tough that Mahia left. But Mahia was also Canadian and like Tantrum, and who goes by Kieran now. Tantrum was the girlfriend of like a friend of ours, Margaret. Tantrum was our first pick, and I don't know why she said yes. I think we were just like really excited, to have her, and she was a great bass player. And for me, I was like, losing Mahia, I was definitely like, look, I don't want to be the only white, non-white person in the band. That's not like what I want to put all my blood, sweat, and tears into. I feel like this is important. But, then when Tantrum said yes, it was just like, we were just so lucky because she's such a great bass player, and also, a little bit of a jester for sure, very mischievous. So I think, Tantrum fit in really well. And I think that Tantrum had a really good time.
Yeah.
And Tantrum and I were like the smallest people in the band. So we are the people who always traveled in a shelf. So in those old, like those passenger vans, you would always build out like a platform, and all your gear would go underneath. And then there'd be the driver and the passenger, and then there'd be another, bench seat. And so the four biggest band members would be in the seats, and the two smallest ones, which were me and Tantrum, would be in the shelf. And we'd be like laying there, and the top of the van was like right in front of our faces. And yeah, we adapted pretty well to that and got pretty close and got to be good buddies.
Okay, so you guys started off with a drummer named Kat. I think plays on the Pig Bitch 7-inch.
Yeah.
Is that the only record with Kat?
Kat was also on the compilation. There's a Dyke in the Pit. I think that might have been it. Yeah.
Yeah. So could we get a few notes on Kat? Like, what kind of person was she?
Kat was hilarious. Actually, Kat was my roommate for maybe a couple years, and a really great carpenter, and like also indulged in stimulants, and was very busy like building a lot of benches in the flat. Kat had a lot of talents and was definitely very goofy and funny. On our first European tour, we were in we're in Norway, and I was blown away. It was so beautiful. And I was also blown away by like, there weren't any borders necessarily. And this is like 92 or something, before the EU. And I was like, wow, like, go across the border in the US is like, it's a thing. But then learned that, like, no, they see that you have like by your license plates or by the look of you that maybe they should pull you over and, shake you down a little bit. And that happened to us pretty much every country we were in. So we got used to it. And, and there's hilarious stories about like basically feeling bad for anybody who pulls over a band and decides that they're going to go through their whole van. Really, like maybe the chances that you'll find something are there, but pretty gnarly to do, right? These people have been living in this van, like packed in the van. So this happened to us a couple times. And once in Norway, Kat ingested her whole supply for the tour as soon as we got pulled over. And after a couple days, it was like, what the fuck is going on with you? Like, this is insane. We kind of just like, pass it off of like, well, typical drummers, they're going to blow up and you're going to have to get another one. Very, Spinal Tap story. But afterwards it was like, we need a drummer who can keep time and not like be, accelerating through everything. So it's hard to make those decisions. And I know we're not the only band that's had to make decisions like that, because once you've been on the road with somebody and you've spent, hours in the recording studio with somebody, like they're your mates. They're like, you've been in the trenches with them, and to ask somebody to leave, it's the first time where I realized that breaking up with friends can be just as painful as breaking up with like a romantic partner, and complicated. And I happened to be dating Max at the time, and Max was such a great drummer, and we were so fortunate because we already had a US tour booked when we made that decision. But yeah, Kat was like very brilliant in her own way, still out there somewhere. Haven't run into her at all.
You haven't talked to her since she left the band?
I think we just run into each other just a couple times. I've had a lot of people from that time. A lot of people don't make it, and sometimes you don't hear about it for a while. We had that experience with Kat for a moment, but Kat's still out there as far as I know. But yeah, it has been a symptom of like the community that I've been in, that you'll lose folks, and sometimes forever. And yeah.
So collectively, was there a musical inspiration for Tribe 8? Which bands could you all agree on?
No, we didn't agree on too many things. Lenny was a huge Jim Morrison fan, and I am not. Lenny also loves Patti Smith. And I have a great respect for Patti Smith's work, and live, I'll admit, like, she's definitely a conduit to like the ether. Some people are like that, when they perform, you just feel like the universe is speaking through them. Patti Smith has that, but
there's really no, like, you can't compare Tribe 8 to any other band. Like, you never heard another band and thought maybe they stole your sound.
I think everybody had really different musical influences, and it was rare that people would like bring something in and be like, wow, listen to this. You know, there were only a few times when we would do a cover, and then we would just kind of make it more our own, you know, and that was anything from Golden Earring to Aretha Franklin, you know.
Yeah. Well, just on the subject of other bands, had you played with any of the bigger bands like in the 90s? Because Tribe 8 made it into a NoFX song. I don't know if you know that. They mentioned Tribe 8 in one of their songs.
In NoFX.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't think I knew that.
Are you a fan of NoFX? Do we hate NoFX?
I don't know them very well.
Oh, okay.
They kind of weren't they like skater punks? California skater.
Yeah, they're like a skate punk band, but
Yeah.
um, I mean, you guys have a little bit of skateboarding in your music. There's a few skateboard mentions.
Mm. Yeah. I'm neutral on NoFX only because I definitely have heard of them.
She's going to the Tribe 8 show. Plenty of voices to choose from. Except the Daleks of ISIS.
Well, I'll tell you, one of their songs is called Liza, and that's the one that features Tribe 8. It's probably a song that you wouldn't like, but they obviously felt it was necessary to mention Tribe 8 in that song.
That's funny.
But yeah, I don't know. Other big bands, you never cross paths with the Lunatics?
Yeah, we played shows with the Lunatics.
Oh, really? I
Yeah.
never knew that.
Yeah, and Gina's sister Ren was girlfriends with Lenny when we first started. So we definitely played shows with them in New York, and then also on the East Coast.
One of my next guests might be Gina from
Really?
the Lunatics.
Oh,
Yes.
Gina's so nice.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, Lunatics, one of my all-time favorite bands. But yeah, just thinking back on, we've both sort of said she, he. I mean, there's a whole gender thing that could take a long time to talk about. We don't need to take a long time to talk about it. But do you think Tribe 8 were kind of ahead of their time with the whole gender politics? Because I've noticed even in talking to people, even now they'll say she and then they'll say, oh, I meant he, but then in the same sentence they'll make the same mistake. Like, it is hard to remember that each person, you know, wants to be defined in a specific way.
Right.
Were you ahead of your time, do you think?
Maybe in this particular genre, yes. You know, in punk rock, yes. But on as far as like human history, absolutely not. Like this idea that gender is a spectrum, or that there's, you know, gender is not a binary, or all of that, like that's all new. That's like monotheism, you know, going out and colonizing the world and taking away from culture everywhere, where there used to be, you know, in a lot of cultures there's actual words and pronouns for other, you know, people, and there were roles for other, you know, people who were neither male or female, or that there would be people who would like live, you know, assume different roles. So to just be like we were ahead of our time, it's like, I don't know, I think maybe we were trying to catch up, you know. I think that like the whole world needs to catch up to what to what we destroyed and to what we lost, like in our own cultures and in the cultures that, like, you know, got totally steamrolled. There's so much that, you know, was not only like destroyed, but also like made illegal, and making certain languages illegal and that kind of thing. Like, it is, for me, it's a little bit like we were famous as a lesbian band. So then, and all these articles about us being women, it does, it's not complicated, but sometimes, of course, it's going to come up for sure, Even at the time, like when we had roles in our band, the Spice Girls were very popular when we were on tour. And so we had our own Spice names. And there was like Old Spice. And there was, Dad Spice. And I don't know, there was a bunch. I was Five Spice. And, we all...
I could say strap-on Spice.
Yeah. It was just silly, but... And we would always call Slade Gramps, and Silas was Dad, and so we called each other all kinds of names, and so it felt like it's always been fluid in the band, and now it's like, oh, okay, we're in a totally different context. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned a little bit of the controversy at the shows a little bit earlier. That's a thought that I had in my notes as well. There was some angry feminists that were like actively against Tribe 8. I mean, what happened with that? Because was that something you faced for the entire run of the band? Were there always feminists against Tribe 8?
I think before we started, there was a divide in feminism between like, what a feminist is and sex workers and, women who were part of the SM scene and, playing with different roles. So I think that was already established before we started performing. So maybe, I think that there is also a disconnect between the generation that's maybe just only a few years older than me, or maybe even my age. And the lesbians saw gender as being very binary. There's men and there's women. And then there would be separatists. So they would create culture that was only amongst women. And so then it became very difficult for people who were, leaving, say, the camp of women, and they were leaving. And then there were other people who wanted to come into the camp of women. And so it was this idea of like, anybody who moved between the camps was the enemy. And so that was also, I think, came into play during, my time coming out, because when I was coming out, like there were lesbians were sequestered away in the woods on women's land or something. It didn't feel like it was a part of like, the culture, or like it wasn't accessible for somebody who was 16. I didn't know anybody. There wasn't anybody on TV. So, there wasn't really much literature or any kind of media except for like, psychological studies or something. And so I think that was starting to like dissipate when we came into it. And I think that there was, there were folks that it was like, this is their culture and it was really sacred to them. But we were just like, yeah, that's not what we're doing. And we are coming from this, subculture that's mostly male dominated, but I don't know. It was a very, it's a bit painful for me that I didn't have like queer mentors. And, you know, it's something that, that I feel a little bit sad about. And, you know, also like women older than me, they got married and had babies and had a more conventional life until like their children were grown. And then, you know, and we did meet, you know, there were women like that came to our shows, it was pretty cool to have, you know, all walks of life and ages, you know. I think that, you know, the idea of feminism has had to really be a lot more expansive, because that was also what is now kind of referred to as, you know, white feminism. And, you know, it was just very specific, like a very specific thing that probably needed to happen for those people at that time, you know. And I understand, like, for me, it's really important to be surrounded by folks who are like me and who understand, and we have this camaraderie. And so when we go out into the world, we know we have this community, you know, we're not alone, even though like we might feel or be marginalized. So that's an important thing to do. And it's a very like, it was kind of mind-blowing, you know, that I think they show that in the documentary when we were at Michigan. And we decided we'll have a workshop afterwards of like, so you have a problem with Tribe 8, you know, to hear what folks had to say. And it was really, like, it was interesting. And there's this thing of like, if you piss off the people that you're mad at, that's great. But if you start pissing off people that you feel like you should have some solidarity with, or who should understand you, then you're like, well, what's the disconnect here? And I mean, we can't afford to have like these small differences always creating all these fractures. So I think that hopefully a lot of feminists have really been like, well, we have to be more expansive and, you know, hear what other people who are really different than me, you know, what their experiences are. But it is kind of a weird thing. And, you know, but there was.
Well, let's just give people a little bit of context for anyone who doesn't know. Like, what we're talking about here is what goes on at the Tribe 8 shows, where, you know, it's a display mostly by Lynn of, you know, cutting off the strap on as a sort of way of saying, you know, we're taking the power, you know, from the rapist. And a lot of the feminists were saying things like, we don't want to be seen trying to take that power away because we don't want to become the thing that we hate. So, you know, I can't remember the exact wording of it, but they were having an issue with some of the taboo subjects of what Tribe 8 was doing on stage.
Yeah, right. And there were some people who were just like, we promoted violence against women. And that was just, I think that was sort of like this, well, it's, you know, that was the pushback on like women who enjoyed role playing or any kind of SM. And that was just like, I don't know. I think we're doing this really gay art. I don't know what you're talking about, you know? But so when we played in Germany, it was very interesting because we did play some shows that were women only, because in Germany, you can have exclusive events where certain people weren't allowed, as long as it was like, you know, the marginalized people or whatever. I mean, the Germans did what they could to like try to deal with being Nazis. And that was kind of one of the things. And, you know, like I said, it makes sense, to like move with confidence in the world. You feel like you need to have some kind of community if you're being marginalized out in the general public. So, but we had, I can't even tell you, like, this is a real thing that would happen after almost every show in Germany. Like, I would be sitting there and somebody would come up to me and I'd be like, oh, cool. I'm going to make a friend. And, and she would just be like, I need to ask you something. And it was just like, and it would always be like, why do you perform for men? And I would just say, I don't perform for men. I perform for myself. And they're like, yeah, but when they see you, they can fantasize about you. And I'm like, so I shouldn't leave my house? And, and I still think about that a little bit. Like, and at first I was like, that's so fucked up. Like, but it's like, wow, this is was a concern, but I, in the end, I just started saying, like, look, I feel like it's really important for men to see people like us doing the things that we do. I feel like that's really important. And, and I get older and I have friends that have kids and they have sons, and they're like, they take their sons to go do and see things and be taught by women just so that they know that, like, you get to, explore, I don't know, like marine biology. So I'm going to, hook you up with my friend who's a marine biologist, who's also a woman, just little small things like that. So, but I don't want to just trash women who think that way or used to feel that way. It's never like how I was personally. I mean, I've always moved in the world a lot more with women than men, but I never really felt like like separatism was never anything that I wanted to implement in my life. And a lot of the women that I had lived with in my life who were separatists and didn't want any men in the house ended up being with male partners. So I'm like, if you're that focused on somebody, like if you're that focused on the gays, maybe you're gay. I don't know. I guess, I said I don't want to trash them, and maybe it sounds like I just trashed them, but I feel like there is a place for, lesbian separatism. And I also feel like in the world of Tri-Bait, like, gender was fluid. And so that just couldn't exist, and, and then since then, to have a lot of non-binary friends and a lot of transgender friends, it's like, yeah, you can judge people for their shoes now, not their gender or whatever. You judge people for their fashion choices.
But did anyone ever have an issue with the name of the band? And I did want to ask that as well. Like, who named the band?
I don't think people had an issue with the name of the band, just because it's sort of, it's a bit vague. And, when we first started, we called ourselves Venus Envy. And then we got a very strongly worded letter from some people in a band called Venus Envy. And we're like, okay. We liked Tri-Bait because it kind of had a little bit of a ancient and also future feel to it. And it was a play on words.
Well, I just got to say, all my favourite Tri-Bait songs are the fastest songs. There's some good slow ones, but the fast ones always get to me. Like, was there a reason for speeding up the band? Because It started off very slow. It got faster and faster. Was there a reason for that? By the third album, it's like pure speed.
Well, when you're not very good at what you do, you got to play slow. I mean, when we played those songs live, we played really fast.
People, we start trouble. Fuck shit up. First air bubble. We like this goddamn thing. Blood, moving in the boxes. Our name's flag. People, hey me, I'm gonna die. It like me a lot of I committed suicide. They think I was great if I just away. Hit a monster than that. I wanna see the sad. People, hey me.
You know, we had a tiny reunion, me, Lenny, and Silas. I got a couple pals to fill in on bass and drums. And we played People Hate Me. And that was really fun. 'Cause yeah, it's kind of really hilarious too.
I used that song in a skateboard video twice.
Yeah.
I think that might be my favourite song, actually.
Aw.
Are there any rare tracks floating around anywhere that we haven't heard?
There was a recording that we did in Los Angeles. And I don't know if you have it, but it was the last thing that we did, and it was a demo. Do you have that?
I don't think so.
We made some CDs, but it was called Thanks for the Memories, but we never released it. You have that?
No, I had it in my notes. That's what I was going to ask you about that as well, because I was so confused. I can't find it anywhere. There's nowhere that sells it.
Yeah. There's a few songs that aren't on anything else. With a couple of okay, and then there's a cover of Rebel Girl and a cover, I don't know if I have this.
So what? Like only the band members have it because it never came out?
I mean, I don't even know if I have it. We got some LA person that wanted to manage us. We recorded it, but it was going to just be for like promotion to try and, just see what the next step was going to be. And then that's kind of when things were like, 2005. I think we were just done. But I feel like it was before 2005 when it came out, or definitely before that.
That is the release that I'm most curious about as well, because obviously I've never.
It wasn't released, yeah.
You guys did a couple of short films and were featured in one of the full-length films. You made your own, I think it's a short film called Estrofem in 1998.
Yeah.
Where was that shown? I can't find anything on this.
It was just like a little Super 8 that I did that was I put it on VHS and did a couple of film festivals. That's all. It wasn't, yeah.
Do you not own it? Like, you can't send it to me?
I'll have to see if I still have it. I probably have it. So I probably have a copy somewhere, but it'd be on VHS.
I've got tapes.
Okay.
I've got loads of tapes.
Wait. Give me like 2 minutes. I'll be right back. Let's see.
All right.
Well, I found a box of tapes, but I had to go through it, and yeah, this stuff is kind of buried in boxes, if I even have it.
Okay.
I'll try, and I'll and I'll reach out to Lenny because he's much more likely to have something, especially the thanks for the memories. I know I have something somewhere, but I don't know where.
So, what was the reason for the Tribe 8 documentary? Was there talk of maybe the band was breaking up and maybe that contributed? Maybe we should make a film?
We were actually approached by the woman, Tracy Flanagan, the filmmaker, and she did it all. She was really good. She worked really hard. There were a lot of people who were, doing maybe like a college project or, thought that they would like, interview us or something. And a lot of those folks, people weren't always really great at interviewing, and she really made us feel at ease. And she was assaulted in the underground train system, and she asked some worker there for help, and he didn't help her, and she got assaulted, and she ended up suing them. And she had like some money. I don't know exactly how much. And she was a filmmaker, and she was like, I'm gonna use it to make a film. And for some reason she came to one of our shows, and she was like, I'm gonna do a documentary on this band. And that's how that film happened. And then she had the funds to like film us in New York and film us in LA, and go to the Michigan Music Festival, and she worked really hard. Like, I think she did a really good job considering, like, how chaotic everything is, like trying to capture a band, and she did that over years. And so, yeah, I think she did a really great job with what she was working with. And yeah, that wasn't necessarily our idea.
Yeah.
But it was.
But it seems that we could kind of tell that the band was ending by the end of the documentary. You had that a new bass player as well by the end. I'm forgetting her name now. It's
Teresa. Teresa. We always called her Mama T.
Yeah. Are you still in touch with all of these people, including the filmmaker?
The filmmaker a little bit. I mean, she lives in LA, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. But the last drummer, Jen, actually lives in London now. She's been there for like 10 years.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. You can watch the documentary for free on Vimeo, so you don't have to go out of your way.
I have the DVD.
I mean, yeah. But if you're telling other people to, see the documentary, they can watch it for free on is it Vimeo? Vimeo?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so. Yeah. So, okay, so you keep in touch with everyone. We ever took, because it's kind of the anniversary it's the 20th year anniversary, another anniversary of the band kind of ending. Are we talking about bringing the band back? Because the Lunatics came back. That's very exciting. Maybe Tri-Rate should come back. Maybe it's time.
Well, we did have that little reunion. It was at my party, and I just had this party, and I just had like 24 ideas, and every person that I asked said yes to me, and it felt crazy. And so I got to perform with, Tri-Bait and this lion dance group that me and my friend Jen may have. And then the lion dance group also has a band, and we played a song, and that was really fun. So we played 3 songs in my driveway. It was just, because Lenny does bring up doing a reunion, and I just really feel like if we were to do that, I would only do it like 1,000%. Like, I would want to just be really formidable, like coming back, and not just like, oh, we're gonna do this thing, and do it half-ass. Or not that we would necessarily, but it's just hard because Lenny and I live in the Bay Area, but nobody else does, right? But it was really fun because we just played in my driveway, and we played 3 songs, and it was like, it did feel really good, just even physically, to just be like, oh man, I really miss playing punk rock. I really miss like the fun and the anger and the goofiness, and just like jumping up and down, and just, yeah, it was a really good thing. So, but I don't know. I mean, it's still, Kieran has been in Toronto now for, I don't know, over 20 years, like gone, sad. And then kind of lost touch with Slade a little bit, but I'm pretty sure Slade's still in LA. I don't know. I mean, anything can happen, but it would be expensive because nobody lives here, we live in different places. So I don't know.
Yeah, I'd hope for it to happen. But let's say somebody new is about to get into this band. Which album would you be happy that they start with?
God, I don't know. I feel like they're all a little bit different, because it did evolve a lot. Like the first release that we did, There's a Dyke in the Pit. I feel like that was really important because it was also the first release for Bikini Kill and 7 Year Bitch, right? And then and Lucy Stoners are on there, and but then it's like, well, our most recent release, not the demo, that was kind of us after we'd been really seasoned. And like you said, like we were a lot more comfortable with our instruments. We kind of learned to play together, and so you could start on the ends and work your way to the middle.
Yeah, I'd just highly recommend the song "People Hate Me." That's just a badass song. But Leslie, I'm gonna let you get back to your life. We'll have to get you back on because there's so much fun shit to talk about. Okay. So if you could maybe help me out with any of the other band members, maybe. Or...
Okay.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you so much for doing this. This has been so exciting for me.
Good. I'm all like, ooh, I got to go through some boxes. Take care, Jay.
All right. Bye.
Bye.